Let's come back to Lynn Margulies in Amherst, Massachusetts, literally in the backyard of Emily Dickinson. In Symbiotic Planet, here's a very short paragraph to let you know her style in person. In Brittany, on the northwest coast of France, and along beaches bordering the English Channel, is found a strange sort of, quote, seaweed that is not seaweed at all. From a distance, it is a bright green patch on the sand. The patches slosh around, shimmering in shallow puddles. When you pick up the green water and let it slip through your fingers, you notice gooey ribbons much like seaweed. A small hand lens or low-power microscope reveals that what looked like seaweed are really green worms. These masses of sunbathing green worms, unlike any seaweed, burrow into the sand and effectively disappear. They were first described in the 1920s by an Englishman, J. Kibble, initial J, who spent his summers at Roscoff. Kibble called them plant animals, quotation marks, and diagrammed them splendidly in the color frontispiece of his book, Plant Animals, with a hyphen. The flatworms of the species, Convoluta roscofensis, are all green because their tissues are packed with platymonous cells. As the worms are translucent, the green color of platymosas, photosynthesizing algae, shine through. Although lovely, the green algae are not merely decorative. They live and grow and die and reproduce inside the bodies of the worms. Indeed, they produce the food that worms eat. The mouths of the worms become superfluous and do not function after the worm larvae hatch. Sunlight reaches the algae inside their mobile greenhouses and allows them to grow and feed themselves as they leak photosynthetic products and feed their host from the inside. The symbiotic algae even do the worm a waste management favor. They recycle the worm's uric acid waste into nutrients for themselves. Algae and worms make a miniature ecosystem swimming in the sun. Indeed, these two beings are so intimate that it is difficult without very high-power microscopy to say where the animal ends and the algae begins. Interdependent arising. Life is not a dependent chain of causality. Only a deluded individual functioning seemingly independent would be able to even countenance such an abhorrence. And yet, the systems approach, powered by an industrial, corporate structure with military intent to enforce it, obtains within a couple of years a global reduction of, quote, fragmentation. Not so. One of the qualities of delusion is that it evaporates the closer that it gets to the nightmare it will waken. One of the most powerful poets in the world lived in the 700s in India. His name was Shanti Deva. Shanti means peace. Deva means the divine. The poet, divine peace. His greatest work in 10 books, 10 sections, is called the Bodhicaryavatara. Bodhi, enlightenment; Karya, carrying; Vatara is the vehicle for carrying enlightenment. The Bodhicaryavatara has a couple of poignant books or chapters. The one that I prefer is the 8th. The one that the Dalai Lama prefers is the 9th. And so the current Dalai Lama has a tremendous commentary on the 9th book, the 9th chapter of Shanti Deva's Bodhicaryavatara, Transcendent Wisdom, a commentary guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, because the vehicle carrying enlightenment is not the goal, enlightenment, but is the gifting of companionship along the way, where all together carry together. And enlightenment is not where you get to, not a destination. It's not a goal. It's not the winning out of global or universal coming together. It is a sharing. I'll come back to the Dalai Lama. He gave up a couple of years ago his position as the head of the Tibetan state, the Tibetan government, as well as the head of Tibetan Buddhism, the Vajrayana, Vajra being the diamond, Yana, the way, the diamond way. One of the characteristics of the sect of the Dalai Lama, the Geluks, the Gelugpa, is that they train themselves in debate. They are masterful debaters, which should be distinguished from masturbators. Shanti Deva does that in especially a poignancy of the 8th book, the 8th chapter of the Bodhicaryavatara. This is a great translation of Marian Maddox. There is a world's classic translation also, which is generally available, but I learned from this translation, and I still prize it. The hand is loved as a member of the body. Why are living beings not loved as members of the universe? And universe here should be more properly translated as the cosmos. The universe in Sanskrit is Dharma Dhatu, the being there of truth, whereas in the high Dharma, the term occurs in a pair, tathata and shunyata. The tathata is the suchness. The shunyata is the suchness gone. In Sanskrit, gone is gata. So that in the Mahayana, unlike the Theravada, the monks of the original way, the elder way, when they rise in the morning, they recite the Heart Sutra, especially the kernel, not the core, but the kernel that one can harvest from the Hridaya Sutra. And in Sanskrit, it recites as Gati, Gati, Paragati, Bodhisvaha. Gone, gone, completely gone. Enlightenment, behold. He writes, thus the Lord Avalokita has given his own name to protect a man from even the fear of being timid in the assembly. Avalokita is Avalokiteshvara, who is the Bodhisattva of mercy. The Dalai Lama is said to be the emanation of Avalokiteshvara, which is somewhat peculiar when you know the high Dharma, because the Avalokiteshvara was originally feminine. But her femininity was interpenetrated so perfectly that the completeness of femininity or the completeness of masculinity became cosmic. Avalokiteshvara is in the original iconic symbol presentation, very tall, silhouette. She is looking down, and she is looking down attentive, not so much to see. Her eyes have the familiar, seems like to those who are worldly, a glaze, but it is really an all-encompassing beholding. But she looks not to see, but to hear. She has ears to hear. She hears the cries. She hears the prayers. And she responds in giving the encouragement that you are heard. No matter who, why, where, when. You are heard. And that hearing has a quality in Sanskrit called punya. Punya means merit. It has merit. And what merit does is it dissolves karma. Punya dissolves karma so that it does not leave a trace. Sometimes when it's a little ineptly, originally, maybe a little too freshly acquired, it seems to leave a little soot. That's a function of one's inexperience and of need to not just pursue and practice, but to resonate differentially into kaleidoscopic, jewel-like beholding. Here's how Shantideva follows this. One should not turn from difficulties because of regard for his reputation. One is without rest protecting that reputation. Whoever wishes to quickly rescue himself and another should practice the supreme mystery, the exchanging of himself for the other. That not dependency, but interpenetration is a shared presence. That shared presence is the core. If one is going to understand in terms of the mind, it is the fragrance that appreciative beholding comes into play. The way in which the Mahayana was first originally presented in language by Ashvaghosha about 90 AD. It's contemporaneous with the Apocalypse of St. John. It's contemporaneous with the return of the cup of the Last Supper and its double transform into the Grail in Antioch. This is how Ashvaghosha, in the beautiful translation by D.T. Suzuki, made in Chicago, a Japanese young Zen master. He was just in his early 20s, in Chicago at the invitation of the Open Court Publishing Company that was getting set to do a lot of translating and publishing, and it came to the Chicago just before 1900 of 1898, and this is D.T. Suzuki's exquisite translation into English. The threefold significance of the Mahayana explained. Again, the quintessence. The quintessence. Again, the quintessence and the attributes of suchness. Not only tacita, but in this case, in Shantideva, he gives it an extra oomph in the language. In D.T. Suzuki, by that time, even though young, already in his genius, sensing the resonances of what Ashvaghosha is presenting, and so he uses a translation that is of the term Buddha tacita, the suchness of a Buddha. But what's being presented in the Mahayana is not the Buddha, but the Bodhisattvas. They're plural. And they're capable of going across nirvana to the other shore. Plural, other shores. Again, the quintessence and the attributes of suchness know no diminution or addition, but remain the same, whether common people, the Sanskrit of that is Prithajnana. Prithajnana is like for villagers. Or Shravakas, that's those who pretend that they're a little better. Pratyeka Buddhas, those that pretend that they have made it on their own. Pratyeka is similar in Sanskrit to preta. Preta means hungry ghost. Bodhisattvas and Buddhas. It was not created in the past, nor is it to be annihilated in the future. It is eternal, permanent, absolute, and from all eternity it sufficiently embraces in its essence all possible merits, punya. That is to say, suchness has such characteristics as follows. The effulgence of great wisdom, the universal illumination of the Dharma Dhatu, the universe. When the universe is illuminated, not just lighted with photons, but illuminated with a very high Dharma consciousness, it radiates. It radiates such that you don't have to have a ticket, you just climb on board. The true and adequate knowledge, the mind pure and clean in its self-nature, the eternal, the blessed, the self-regulating, and the pure. The tranquil, the immutable, and the free. And there is no heterogeneity in all those Buddha dharmas, which outnumbering the sands of the Ganges can be neither identical, urkatha, nor non-identical, nandarthra, with the essence of suchness, and which therefore are out of the range of our comprehension. Accordingly, suchness is called the Tathagata's womb, Tathagata Garbha. Womb is feminine. It is feminine in this sense of mother. If someone is still into identification, one thinks that the high Dharma has to do with a mother goddess. Oh, yes. Even high presentations, like in praise of Tara, songs of the Savioress, that no mere legend or personified abstraction, surely, but a perfect Buddha, a Buddha awakened to omniscience, who has appeared to countless devotees, often saving them miraculously in desperate circumstances. Three major strands intertwined to make the Tara we know today: Bodhisattva, Mother Goddess, and Tantric deity. That is not so. That is good for debates, to make points, to win. All of that is delusion. Not an iota, not a jot is real. It is convenient. And for that, one has to look at the origins of the Gelugpa, the Gelug sect of Tibetan Buddhism, because there are others. The Gelugpa, in terms of their iconic symbols, are the yellow hat lamas. And the first yellow hat lama was Tsongkhapa in the 14th century. And his the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment is now published by Snow Lion in 3 huge volumes. Tsongkhapa. And we'll talk more about Tsongkhapa a little later, because in the Parayana we need to understand the lineages, the heritages, and the combing through of all of them, so that we can emerge refulgent, free, and purely out of business of being let go. The origin of Tsongkhapa is from Atisha. And Atisha wrote near the end of his life in the late 1030s AD, a lamp for the path. And there's a commentary, and there is an appreciation by the 14th Dalai Lama, as one would expect. Atisha came to revive what was supposed to have been the disappearance of Buddhism in Tibet. What Buddhism was in Tibet before. That sect is called the Nyingma. They're the black hat lamas. In our recent time, like the Dalai Lama is the head of the Gelugpa, the head of the Nyingma was a Dujam Rinpoche. And Shambhala Publications put out a big 2-volume, 1,700-page book series of hundreds and hundreds of pages by Dujam Rinpoche to give the development of the Nyingma. And in the Berkeley, San Francisco Bay area, Tarsang Tulku was the carrier of the Nyingma to that San Francisco Bay region and developed in the northern part of Marin County, almost up to where the Russian River is, a monastery called Odeon. But the beginnings of the Nyingma, like the beginnings of the Gelugpa, like the beginnings of the Kargyupa, and all the other Kadampa, all of those sects began in an India where Buddhism was undergoing a massive distillation. Out of the fermentation that had developed with the rise of the Mahayana through incredible brilliance, had come to understand that Avalokiteshvara not only hears, but gifts, and gifts in a way that there is a grace of life that is gifted. And in Central Asia, about the same time that Avalokiteshvara was becoming not hermaphroditic, but really a masculine presentation of universality, the balance to it was a feminine presentation of cosmicality, and that was Kuan Yin. And for Kuan Yin, she reaches back to the origins of Avalokiteshvara, who originally was the Lady Prajnaparamita. So that in the Vajrayana, one comes across 10 perfections, 10 paramitas. They include means, power, those kinds of things. Whereas the 6 paramitas were there with the Lady Prajnaparamita, who was based on Mary Magdalene through St. Thomas, who brought the seed that didn't convert, but made beholding possible for the teacher of Ashvaghosha. His name was Parshva. In that part of India that is today the Swat Valley, Kashmir part of Pakistan. If you go to the Gospel according to Thomas, out of the 114 sayings of the living Jesus, the last one, not the culmination, but the releaser. St. Peter characteristically says to Jesus, "Let Mary go from us. Women are not worthy of the life." And Jesus says to Peter, "Look here, I myself will lead her so that she becomes like all of us, capable of eternity." More next week.